Hey, let's talk about why your show or why your renders aren't getting the procs on the farm that you'd like. Don't forget to subscribe and thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. So when talking about render farms, of course, I'm going to refer you back to some of my previous videos on render projections, on how to use your farm efficiently with a render diet, or you might just want to look at the what the heck is a render farm video. The links will be below. But today, we're going to talk about render triage and why your render wranglers are sort of like doctors in an ER, and they often have to decide whether or not your render is going to get seen next or whether or not it has to sit in the waiting room all night long. And I want to go through what some of the logic is. So by the end, you'll see what the logic of a render wrangler is, and it'll help you understand and maybe work with your team more now that you have this insight. So first, let's talk about render farms, backlogs, and priority. Now here's the thing about render priority. Render priority doesn't matter until it matters. And let me explain what I mean by that. Let's take a look at a render farm. Now, what we have here is a render backlog. What this shows is the queue every night for a few different nights in a render farm. The way we compute this is we take the total number of frames and then the total number of cores per frame that job is requesting, and we just add it up. And this way we can see what's the backlog for the farm tonight. And one thing we can derive from this graph is the backlog is getting chewed through, and there is no backlog by the time everyone arrives in the morning. If you look at what the farm was doing at this time, you'll see the farm was chunking along until the backlogs were eliminated, and then it started to power down because there wasn't anything else to render. So here's your classic backlog and farm graph for the night. This is considered a good, healthy farm where everyone's getting their jobs in the morning, no matter how they're prioritized, and that's why I say prioritization doesn't matter until it does. In this case, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you prioritize them, they all would get done by the morning and everyone would be happy. But let's see what happens when the farm starts to get a little busier. You'll start to see here now that the farm's got some leftover frames at the end of each night. It's not quite as complete as the last one, and the farm is having to chug along till, the wee hours of the morning just to get through the backlog. Now, this is telling you that your farm is about to fill up. This means that a few artists in the morning are probably coming in and finding that their jobs haven't finished or are still running or haven't even maybe picked up on a couple of occasions. So you're going to need to prioritize these jobs. And that way you can figure out which ones will complete overnight. You run those first, and then of course the ones that can probably wait until morning, those run second, and those will still be running when you come in the morning. Most studios can get by on that because it just takes a little bit of strategy between production and the artists, and you can get by with this sort of capacity utilization. But then it starts getting really crazy. As the show starts getting closer to delivery, the frame times get longer, they get more intense, there tends to be more passes, they tend to be less optimized, which again leads to longer frame times. So even if it's the same number of frames, you're going to start seeing those backlogs take longer and longer. So the peaks will get a little higher and the slopes are going to get less steep. And that means that by the morning, you're still going to see a whole lot of frames that never even started on the farm. This is where it gets crazy. This is where you start seeing backlogs, delays. You see a lot of artist angst. You see a lot of production angst. And you start having to make some really hard choices. You're already handing over down there on the running farm. You can see as soon as the nuke jobs end, we try to give all the rest of the frames that we can, all the machines that we can to the lighting load, but it's not enough. It's just not chewing through the load. So what ends up happening here is the farm is full. And this is, at its core, the primary reason you're not getting your frames in the morning. Now we have to figure out how to make do. Like I always say, you can have 40 liters of water and a 20-liter bucket. That 20-liter bucket is only going to hold 20 liters of water. It doesn't matter how many gallons or how many liters of water you need. There's only one bucket's worth is going to fit in one bucket. And only one night's worth of rendering on the farm is going to fit in one night's farm capacity. That's that. So you got to start making some really hard choices. So to revisit, as the life cycle goes through from a studio, often early in a period of a show or a series of shows, all frames will be finishing by 9 a.m. Priority is irrelevant. Everybody's getting everything they need. Then you start to see some frames left over in the a.m. That's where it starts to get a little hairy and you start needing to set up a priority system. And then you get to the situation we're going to talk about now, which is where many frames are left over in the morning. Now, of course, this is where I usually get the call to start adding more render farm to people's studios. But sometimes there's not the ability to get more farm. The studio just won't authorize the purchase, and you've got to make do with what you've got. So what happens then is shows start to steal from each other, and we start to work through a hierarchy. Now, you may have heard Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, in this case, this is Joe's hierarchy of priority. And let's take a look at this hierarchy. So this is shaped like a pyramid, and at the base of this pyramid are the regular, in progress, and special client requests. These are the day-to-day iterations that you're sending back and forth to the client as you're going through and perfecting the look and starting to get through and maybe final a few shots. They may have a few marketing or PR requests, and those are generally what's filling the farm most of the time. But as a show approaches its delivery milestones, it starts to get into milestone and contractual deliveries. Now, those are going to trump those other renders on the farm, and if the wranglers know that these are milestone or contractual deliveries for final frames, well, then they're going to likely prioritize these over those other normal day-to-day renders. As we move up the pyramid further, we start to get into trailer and screening. What this means is, of course, the movie trailers that come out well before the movie comes out, the shots need to be a certain amount of done for that to work. And also there are friends and family screenings and other screenings that are basically test screenings for the movie. And they'll want to get as much of the work done, or at least everything that's been complete to date, into those edits. And those will, again, trump another show. So if let's just say a show has a trailer delivery and another show is just in the middle of its early stages of sending things back and forth to the client, the studio heads may step in along with the wranglers and say, guess what? This show that's not near its delivery is not going to get the farm tonight, or it's only going to get a small portion because this other show has a trailer delivery. These conversations happen every week in most studios I know. Some studios will start to work out this collaboratively amongst producers. Sometimes an executive producer will just make a really hard call, and sometimes it's left to the wranglers and the wrangler manager to use this hierarchy as a fallback. And as we move up, you can see we finally get to final delivery, and this is where it gets really hairy. So you might have one show that has final deliveries and another show that has some milestone deliveries. And I promise you, the show with milestone deliveries does not see their deliveries as lesser than anything else. But in the grand scheme of Joe's hierarchy, it is. The reality is a final delivery will get made before some of those other deliveries. The show that's closest to delivery will get most of the farm. This robbing Peter to pay Paul happens all the time in the studios, and it's often the source of a lot of delays for shows getting back to client because the show before them used up too much of the resources or an unplanned amount of resources, and the show that followed had to pay that price with starting off late right out of the gate. Finally, this one is a little counterintuitive for some people. This is bids and tests. So the work that gets prioritized above everything else is the work that has no contractual attachment. It's free work, and that might be counterintuitive. The reason for that is the only thing more important than making sure that you meet your contractual deadlines is making sure that you have work coming in after those deadlines are met. And so sales is important, and the executive producers are always working with the studios to get bids and tests out there to get future work. So when these shows end, there's other shows that are just starting up. And that's why bids and tests are so important. Bids and tests often don't lead to a large volume of work being on the farm, but it can be very important, or it can have to run very hot with like one job per machine so that it gets through very fast, and this can really get in the way of everyone else. So I wanted to give you a general idea of what's the hierarchy of thought. What is it that a wrangler is going through when they have to make hard decisions? Again, it's best when producers meet with each other, meet with the executive producer for the studio, and have a conversation about how to proc share when there's not enough. And of course, the more you can forecast these needs in advance, the more you'll have these procs when you need them. So go back to my render and projections video, and you'll get an idea of the kind of things you need to do to project and forecast your render needs so that your IT folks and your studio management can procure those render nodes when you need them. So, of course, if you get to that point and you still need more machines than you have, well, that's when you reach out to me. That's actually what I do for a living. I make sure people get the machines either rented or owned. So let me know if your studio needs more render, and I'll make sure that you get some options handed to you quickly. That's it. Thanks, everyone. I hope this helped you understand what's going on inside a wrangler's head when a wrangler has to make really hard decisions in the middle of the night. Cheers.